Oh, in theory, when former WWE Chairman Vince McMahon made a WWE Superstar World Champion, this should have meant that Vince wasn't a huge fan of that specific wrestler. However, over the years, McMahon has reluctantly been forced to put his top title on talents that he doesn't even value. The WWE World Champions, Vince didn't want as champion. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for daily wrestling videos and follow us on Facebook for exclusive lists. Also check out Wrestlelamia.co.uk and our non-wrestling channel, Incredible. Number 10. Jack Swagger. Heading into WrestleMania 26 Money in the Bank ladder match, the two favourites to win were Kofi Kingston and Drew McIntyre. However, rather shockingly, WWE decided to go with Jack Swagger as Mr. Money in the Bank. Swagger was pushed to the moon with immediate effect as he won the world title from Chris Jericho on a post-WrestleMania edition of SmackDown. And for the first month or so, it was obvious to fans that McMahon was actually a fan of Swagger and that he was actually going to try and make him a megastar. Unfortunately for Swagger, McMahon virtually overnight gave up on him. Swagger went from defeating Jericho, Edge and Randy Orton to being unable to secure any victories. By the time the Fatal 4-Way pay-per-view came around in June of 2010, all hope was lost for Swagger as fans simply couldn't see him as a legitimate world champion anymore. He would drop the world title to Rey Mysterio in a Fatal 4-Way match, which also included CM Punk and The Big Show. Swagger's work during this run clearly angered McMahon, and as a result, Swagger was moved down the card and he would never win another world title in WWE. Number 9. Kofi Kingston. Kofi Kingston winning the title at WrestleMania 35 was a truly wholesome moment that will no doubt be celebrated for years to come. But fantastic moment aside, it was evident that following Kingston's WWE title win, Vince McMahon didn't value Kingston as a top main event talent. So much so that during Kingston's reign, he never once main evented a pay-per-view as champion, and this is usually a sign that McMahon doesn't want a superstar as his top guy. When they booked Kingston to defend the title against Brock Lesnar on SmackDown's 20th anniversary episode, fans assumed that Lesnar was going to end Kingston's enjoyable title reign, and in spite of this, fans hoped that Kingston would get a fantastic showing to show the fans that he was still credible and going to linger around the WWE title scene. But Kingston would end up getting squashed in just 7 seconds. McMahon even decided to debut Cain Velasquez after Lesnar's victory, meaning Kingston became an immediate afterthought. McMahon had finally managed to get the title off Kingston, and he would quickly transition back into the tag team wrestler as part of the New Day. Number 8. Dolph Ziggler. A former world champion, Dolph Ziggler has had a respectable WWE career, and he's established as being one of the most reliable in-ring talents in the company. However, during his career, it's been made clear that Vince McMahon failed to see Ziggler as a world championship material, and his 2 world title runs are clear indicators of this. Ziggler's first run took place in 2011 and would be awarded the world title by Vicky Guerrero and would abruptly drop it on the same show. Then in 2013, Ziggler was finally supposed to get his moment. He had a memorable cash-in on Raw following WrestleMania 29 and fans were fully behind his push and subsequent world title win. The week following Ziggler's world title victory, he would lose a non-title match to Jack Swagger on Raw. After this loss to Swagger, fans quickly realised that McMahon wasn't going to get fully behind Ziggler's world title reign. A few short weeks into his world title run, Ziggler suffered a serious concussion which put him on the shelf for a month. When Ziggler returned, WWE decided to immediately take the world title off him. McMahon couldn't resist having Ziggler drop the title, and this would be Ziggler's last ever time as world champion in WWE. Number 7. Chris Benoit. It was no secret that Vince McMahon had a set standard of how he wanted his world champions to look. Although this is definitely true, from time to time McMahon was pressured to put the world title on smaller talent. This occurred in 2004 when they put the world title on Chris Benoit. McMahon, whilst having respect for Benoit's in-ring work, actually found him rather bland in the ring. Benoit's world title run was overshadowed by other storylines and McMahon had a lack of trust in Benoit to carry a central storyline. Benoit eventually dropped the world title at SummerSlam in 2004 to Randy Orton, and following his historic win, Benoit would never be presented as a top star in the company ever again. Number 6. Christian. There were several times during his time in WWE where Christian could have won the world title. In the summer of 2005, Christian had reached his peak of popularity, but McMahon refused to pull the trigger on Christian's world title run. This would lead to Christian signing for TNA, where he became a multi-time world champion, and Christian managed to show McMahon that he was able to be a main event superstar. When Captain Charisma returned in 2005, Christian was placed in a similar position to where he was before he left the company years prior. This all changed in 2011 following Edge's retirement, as WWE decided to give Christian a world title win as a feel-good moment following Edge's sudden and upsetting retirement. On the SmackDown following Christian's monumental win, Christian would be challenged by newly drafted SmackDown star Randy Orton. He would then be forced to face Orton on the show, and WWE actually decided to have Christian lose. Christian had lost the world title just days after winning it. This was a massive sign of disrespect, and it was clear that McMahon was never going to take Christian seriously as world champion. Christian would have another run as world champion during his feud with Orton, but this lasted a month, and it was used as a way to elevate Orton's star power. Number 5. Chris Jericho. Now, according to Jericho himself, Vince McMahon never valued him as a top main event star until 2008. This was when Jericho feuded with Shawn Michaels, and Jericho delivered some of the most compelling character work of his entire career. But before his 2008 seal of approval, Jericho would become the first ever undisputed champion at Vengeance in 2001. Unfortunately, his run was terrible. Jericho was never taken seriously as undisputed champion. He had storylines with The Rock and Stone Cold during this time, and while he attained victories over the two legends on pay-per-view, they were presented as flukes which failed to give Jericho's reign the legitimacy it needed so badly. Jericho was also paired with Stephanie McMahon, and this officially killed Jericho's reign. He was presented as inferior to Stephanie and would do mundane tasks like dog sitting. Jericho would drop the title to Triple H at WrestleMania 18, and it was evident that McMahon had no faith in Jericho as a top guy in the company, and this would explain why he wouldn't win another world title until 2008. Number 4. Rob Van Dam. The One Night Stand pay-per-view in 2006 was a pinnacle of RVD's WWE career. He would defeat John Cena to win the title for the first time. He would then be the face of the revamped ECW brand, and Vince would put a lot of faith in him. As RVD's reign was just obtaining steam, RVD was arrested for drug possession and thus forced WWE to suspend RVD. According to RVD, McMahon was deeply upset with him. His chances of being a top guy had been ruined, and McMahon was never going to trust him ever again. Once he dropped the title, McMahon would never give RVD another world title run, and it was apparent that Vince McMahon had completely lost faith in the ECW original. Number 3. Bray Wyatt. Bray Wyatt reached the top of WWE on 3 separate occasions. However, each world title reign of Wyatt's highlighted how Vince McMahon never understood what Wyatt brought to the table. His first reign took place in 2017, and he won the title at the Elimination Chamber match, but he would abruptly drop it to Randy Orton at WrestleMania in Wyatt's first pay-per-view defense. Here it was reported that McMahon didn't want Wyatt as his champion, and instead he was going to explore different storylines for him. Fast forward to 2019, and Wyatt would win the Universal title as a Fiend character. Then, in one of the most infamous booking decisions of all time, McMahon decided to have the Fiend lose to Goldberg just before Mania. This killed the Fiend's character dead, and the character never seemed to even recover. The Fiend would once again capture the Universal title in the main event of SummerSlam in 2020, but this reign would just last only a week. Whilst McMahon certainly saw some value in Wyatt, it was clear that the moment he agreed to put the title on him, he instantly regretted his decision, and he would do anything in his power to bring his reign to a close. Number 2. CM Punk. Now, the relationship between Punk and Vince can be described in one single word: turbulent. Punk was a multi-time world champion in WWE, but in each of his reigns, McMahon seemed to favour other talent over his current world champion. Take for instance Punk's 69-day world title reign in 2008. Punk's world title run came at a time when WWE megastars John Cena and Batista were still on Raw, and they were both a lot more over than Punk. This meant that Punk's world title run was never a main focus of television, and he was virtually buried as world champion. Punk would last a total of 3 pay-per-views as world champion, but the final and most infamous pay-per-view appearance as world champ saw Punk get punted in the skull by Randy Orton at Unforgiven and would be taken out of his planned world title scramble match. Punk did have an historic WWE title reign between 2011 to 2013. This was a 434-day reign, but even during this reign, Punk had to play second fiddle to Cena. During this time, Punk would hardly ever main event pay-per-views as champion, and if he did, it was because he was facing Cena or The Rock. McMahon simply didn't value Punk at the top level, and nothing Punk could ever do was going to influence McMahon to alter his mind. And number 1, Rey Mysterio. Before 2006, the idea of Vince McMahon ever making Rey Mysterio world champion was unfathomable. Yet at WrestleMania 22, McMahon finally pulled a trigger. He was heavily pressured by other WWE executives to make Mysterio world champion, but it wasn't something McMahon was ever comfortable doing. McMahon outright buried Mysterio's world champion, as he would lose a ton of matches on television to the likes of RVD, Mark Henry, and the Great Khali. Mysterio's reign was a complete flop, as McMahon was too stubborn to present Mysterio in a manner fitting of a world champion. Mysterio would have 2 more reigns as world champ, one in 2010 which lasted 28 days and existed only to further a planned storyline between Kane and Taker. The final of Mysterio's reigns took place in 2011, and Mysterio didn't even make it to the end of the show as champion, as he'd be defeated by Cena in a rather frustrating booking move. But there you have it folks, 10 world champions Vince McMahon hated. Be sure to leave your comments down below, and I'll see you next time with some more wrestling content.